Ding dong, here's a rock and roll song at the door of the world for the band. Earth has a special difference that is a concentrated, that comes with demonstration of how we have a concentrated identity of relationship to itself that it has the same ways we know, but then further, how distinctly where it is not juxtaposed with matter and distinctly where it is semi juxtaposed. There are three identities. This is the same identity that has us knowing that the past, the extent of the past, we know is true always. What is active now, and our group realities that we know are true always. But see now, no, through systems tactical ulterior from its own, the one that uses species body of individual bodies, with all group differences and demonstration of the hyperdifference. Every science has demonstration of its relativity to relativity and to hyperrelativity slash hyperrelativity, not just relativity. This breaching method put roles with theories for a certain type of how are you? How are you? What's up? So in other words, we're in a semi-ancient trap that came before modern religious messengers were born, before Jesus Christ was born. Per records, I always ask what is something about, even if it was made up. Like in other words, what are witch trials about? And if you nature shows us how to answer these questions because we look what was entrenched at the time. Crazy laws and a torture, extortion, slavery method against every single person, sickly distinctly too. And rather than self-value, how sickly non-distinctly, other things, others, ourselves were and still are blamed for what put that entrenched, sickly distinctly, northern colonies and southern colonies before America's founders were even born. In our faces, it is measured and maintained that there are self-valued roles with the logic, nature, and styles of logic at each of the campuses regarding how our founders communicated for us other than is communicated for them. Like, for example, our founders communicated for us to explain themselves as James Madison and as his plan, as a way to show us that they not only didn't have free speech, they had to pretend they had free speech exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needed, or they would be sensed. Even if they were a majority of people, even if they were everyone, black pupils. We are in a semi-ancient trap that is a criminal re-engineering of the republic for which we stand self-value. Rolls with that. Otherwise, that body is sensed. And it's at each age of fact, treatment nature. This is how they get away with it. This is forcing self-valued roles of predicate acts with facts into the databases from off the campuses too. So when we go back and when anyone tries to go back, and speak about the past, there are other names that are going to stay left out. This is like including the names of our countries. See, this is a breaching method against every single individual voice, no matter how powerful a leader could get. They're going to be above locations, areas, and states that are still blaming them, and they're reliant upon precedents and statutes are reliant upon criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions wrought readings of precedents and statutes. Certain type of victim / hyper victim was only allowed to hear descriptions of the names of the sciences, integrity, faith, and other things, others or selves blamed for the causes of that, like slavery. Our founders communicated for us to understand that how that was a part of a torture, extortion, and slavery method against our founders. We are not even allowed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. people use the knowledge of good and evil. For example, to use a phrase from the Old Testament, but it's out of sequence. See, the Old Testament comes with a part before this that says, only defend this part of the book right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together. But the people who attack the religions and the people that defend the religions, and the difference of that, it is used remotely by a breaching method, where identities A through Z are being used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions wrought, and pretending otherwise they are sensed, including if they are a majority of people, including if they are everyone, including if it's a grouping of countries. This breaching method knew that countries would try to group to overcome where and how. They're increasingly, as fact-cheating nature, forced to respond to the real causes worst of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, like problems with the border, incapable of doing it properly, so doing it with and as further collusions, with use of that base as the republic for which we stand, other nations' equivalents, and as their ancient exceptions, because the republic was reliant upon exceptions. Because the only competition was, in other words, was to discern which system was not. In other words, if any system leaves out the smallest finite detail or relativity of it, like all those systems leaving out the environment, because they're leaving out nature first of all, and they're leaving it with the debatable. There's a quality of fact-cheating nature that is criminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer. Not a policeman. In other words, there are predicate acts with facts, roles. Even if people didn't know or realize, everyone's just repeating what others say. All sides in criminal civil cases, and the courts' names, and the police forms, and their campuses, and between them, there were our roles with predicate acts with facts that the breaching method made self-valued because it keeps them connected. It used remotely the difference. It used remotely simultaneously Americans and the Saudi attackers to use both America's identity and the Saudis' identity remotely, criminally foreign influence, black pupils. WFSB had roles with this before the World Trade Center attacking it and since. Also with the sources of WTNH and Fox Connecticut News and names next to their locations. Increasingly, it's concentrated their roles with wire crime acts and methods with the same house. Increasingly tied to people who pretended I had conversations with the police when I was a kid. And the kids who did go in there and have conversations with them, like a Chris Walters. He was a stranger used to pretend other and plant roles, fake. No, I didn't even respond. I barely even knew him. We went in a car with me one time and they were brought to the police to ask questions about that. I only know him seeking me out as a stranger. There are other strangers. There are a couple I don't even know their names. One of them is a Robert Rodriguez, who brought up the principal child abusers campus. That was hid per the courts and police forms, a whole bunch of regular police agencies with the same house, and a proven principal child abuser that they had roles forcing, and with retired police chiefs involved with the same house, since before the people that lived in one of them lived there. And he has roles where they used to live. Also, 3 spots at the end of the Burlington Turnpike, increasingly people planting evidences on and off the state capitol, and with names, with conversations where they're planting evidences and hiding their roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, a whole bunch of different countries, and their roles with that on and off campuses and next to them. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, black pupils. We have this hyperscope to peer, to force the quality of fact, cheap nature. See the prices of the food in the markets. See the impositions in the world. In other words, there are logistical impositions because the military experts, they're using their difference fake. UConn is leaking right now. I've been asking guys to get on paper. They force UConn has rules with lawyers, and this is not, I don't even know where UConn's all campuses are messed up with this. They have rules with judges and prosecutors, people on off the state corrections offices and off the state judicial branch offices next to them, with wire crime accident methods and medicines crimes and drugs crimes with kids. Psychology is tactically delusions raw. They have all kinds of rules with the FBI in its defending capacities, with a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases and the news at the same time, in foreign and domestic bodies planting evidences. Has something to do with their roles. A Kerr family and a Ray Collusion and a Joe DeMoro as the people involved with the wire crimes and Weathersfield police that are switching and forging names now, years later. These are people that have pretended to know me since I was a kid, made fake exceptions. And like there's ones I don't know at all, like a Joshua Julian. I recorded him on the principal child abuser's Facebook page, involved with a whole bunch of people personally involved with Facebook and the networks and the agencies and courts that have been planting predicate acts with facts. They have roles of all natures of crime scenes relative to this because they use all the identities of law and their difference, used remotely, showing they need to hide what they are actually recorded standing value as criminal insidiousness / hypercriminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer. They're also hiding what is actually recorded from the presidents each. Someone must teach. Washington, D.C. has ties with the World Trade Center and with natures of trade. Like for example, they have experts on the mind and reason with the identities of law. They're criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. The nature of conversation and their questions, or we have respect for we know how to sacrifice things. The breaching method knew they were going to say that because the breaching method employed only capable of being in cities, for example, in suburbs, let alone in cities. The suburbs were just designed before America's founders were born for a torture, extortion, slavery method. The quality of fact-cheating nature forced with this, like with the nature debate contains quality aspects in nature as criminal insidiousness nature / hypercriminal insidiousness nature. For example, not just also leaving out the breaching method. A breaching method is a scientific value that nature itself shows us is one of the things that is true always that caused slavery. And the breaching method rolls with it. It measured and maintained countries individually grouped and together. It made those groups counters syntactically, therefore physically too, to what it caused and maintained. It maintains, which also is demonstrated by nature. But everything it does now, it does through countries A through Z, names A through Z, or that body is sensed, including if it is a majority of people, including if it is everyone, Black pupils. There are impositions forced by the nature of what they call peaceful nuclear energy generation. When we speak about energy generation, the nature debate left out how this breaching method forced the suburbs tactically denatured to be a landscape theater, so they would be reliant more and more, just like the Native Americans against Native Americans, tactically denatured everything, so they would be more and more. And the difference between them and the colonists, the same exact thing. Their difference too, used by the breaching method to measure and maintain itself, left out with it. There are proofs that if we appreciate the breaching method as a scientific value properly, nature itself is showing us to charge. And a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise that is not the name of countries A through Z, nor the transnational or the interstates criminal enterprises or criminal insidiousness natures. Now, this is generated relative to the predicate acts with facts roles and denials and or natures that are and were used to keep from people from discerning, like using what is true always. People, little kids and adults tried to say from before, like just other people, well, you know how to establish the truth by saying, you know how slavery was unnatural. And we are showing people in the news media who will say, oh, and they'll make a fake side. And they'll say, and they're in collusion though. The answer is that slavery is criminal insidiousness nature / hypercriminal insidiousness nature. As we've, and it's relative to how these are there are 5 distinct hyper invisible, but still discernible parts to the extent of the identity of hyper simultaneous, that the identity or the identity of space / existence, its complete identity to the extent we can discern of it. Again, has those 3 parts of time that we know about. We are here now value, like the value of the seasons that aren't even here yet. We know about extent of the future it is showing us now, as itself knowing now. We can be systems other than its own, but nature's science method shows us our special difference, and Earth's a special difference as a concentrated value here, where it will stay equally as all identities relative to positive and negative simultaneously, while more and more positive that will only stay positive unto itself is made. But so we could be systems individually grouped together. We could all agree, countries A through Z, members of A through Z at the same time, to be systems tactical ulterior and agree, in other words, from its own. But it will demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures like criminal insidiousness, natures, wrongdoers, wrongdoing itself, predicate acts, it's themselves. We're speaking about predicate acts with facts when we're speaking about black pupils, whites of eyes. We need a strong legal person now, because we're going to have to make, this is all kinds of natures of organized crimes are manifest, methods of that have been all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts at the same time, the private and legal and formal law names, on-off corrections offices and next to them, and at the prisons themselves. Like Sandy Hook has a prison there that has rolls with various natures of crimes and criminals before they were caught, and next to body dumping spots that are totally different connected murders and body dumping spots, to have connections made for them intercities that can be discerned. This is going to bring up how, where, and how a whole bunch of people go, in other words, go into the law criminally foreign influence before they do. In other words, predicate acts with facts, roles, needs, natures, certain type of victim / hyper victim. This breaching method measures and maintains only capable of being. For where and how nature shows us that not only they are changing James Madison's communications and the founders behind him and George Washington and that original plan, they are using that roles with that self-value to measure and maintain. Means to show them and to sense through them if anyone's going to use what is actually correlative, actually capable of being. Definition, syntax, proper advice, and descriptions of instances and of names and of situations. A through Z, we are in a situation where all formal identities, the law, and the names of the sciences, at A through Z, countries A through Z, locations, areas, states A through Z, everywhere the species body is, incapable of defending their styles and natures of logic with convictions and of affording proper defense against that hyper sophistication that is discernible also relative to where and how. In other words, people would get away with denying this by quoting research or things that are published, originally still, mass criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, fake sides and differences roles with a breaching method that needs that. So too, when the future looks back, itself, everything it caused and keeps stays blamed on all that. A hyper addition with it wouldn't be. Not science spoke honestly for the suburbs, let alone for the cities. So the leaders need to rely upon people who are going to speak for the law. There are collusions with predicate acts with facts. Increasingly, the difference between their roles with it or the overt criminal enterprises or the private ones. They run in their people, all kinds of natures of people. We have, they use differences, roles. They spoke against or for the law, and or its convictions formal, and or its convictions with the voices in the media of all natures, the differences of the public television or of the news media. They have collusions with a whole bunch of different countries, and the difference of that consciously used also. Way worse than just elections crimes. Weathersfield has Russians, Koreans, um, nothing against you Russians and Koreans. This is against your own too. All kinds of psychiatry. Like at Harvard Hospital has a whole bunch of people tied to Weathersfield police forging and switching names and making confessions and then going away, putting God knows what in records. They pretended they had conversations with me at the police department when I was a kid or at my house, the police. And through the mail, they're doing this with the courts too. A whole bunch of people that work for Harvard courts and the Britain Superior Court and Connecticut's District Court have rules with predicate acts with all sides of criminal and civil cases in the news at the same time. So they will prevent voices and crime scenes in campuses as rules with recorded inter and intra each campus and each type of campus, and then the same thing intercities and intra and intercity. That's used remotely. So these are increasingly people next to a whole bunch of schools with the intelligence families increasingly involved with wire crimes, with the various police departments, with the same house/S involved, also with Afghan leaders and kids. Nothing personal against you guys. And retired police chiefs, like a police chief Cintron. And Mazzucato Bakery has something to do with them all along routes 175 and Route 3. With identity theft, fraud, slanders, mass evidence racketeering worse than war crimes roles. Forgiveness is because that is only capable of being with these people. And their rules with sequence shifts relative law. And with the differences, see the differences of the Saudi attack. Saudis were also forced by whiting forensics, increasingly has roles with the body dumping spots too. And people with Sandy Hook campuses involved with proven first forced child abusers, leaders of kids, and further. The FBI and the courts and the state judicial and corrections offices is also involved with the news media and criminally foreign influence uses of the social media pages of the campuses and of their courts to pretend passions and emotions and legitimacy while they're stealing our identities with and putting us with fake conversations with the news too, fake locations with the news and with themselves and with others. So we're going to address the mass torture, extortion, slavery method singular. That is with all the individual grouped and simultaneous ones. Then further, singular / hypersingular. In other words, there was a breaching method that had slavery intrinsically distinctly north and south, but it was also not sickly non-distinctly. And this goes with the suits and ties and the nature of debate regarding the relativity of this, which is inseparable from the nature of the suburbs having been designed for the torture, extortion, and slavery of our founders, which is inseparable from where and how and why we have prevented honesty about the extortion of George Washington, let alone of our founders and James Madison and his plan. This is also evidence. We have suburbs that we don't have logistical security, all natures and regarding how they make money and pay themselves. The gates to each of the sciences even the sports. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by nature itself, where and how nature shows us the identity the sciences share. And it uses to communicate with us. The only increasing value of our difference being how and non-difference simultaneously, but then further hyper simultaneously, because our species body, individual group difference slash S, and individuals of the individual species body, just like the other species bodies. We're different species, but we have the same quality aspects in nature simultaneously for something that is further hyper simultaneous. Its identity in relationship to itself, and the value of that are equally only increasing. And this generated its identity in relationship to itself, and the value of that only increasing. The identity of all space slash existence generated the value of three identities of zero and their relativity to its one identity of hyperrelativity. From our perspective, with every subject individually or group that we could grapple with or find with revelations. In other words, these are natural revelations we are shown how we could know with the difference between, why we should know, pay attention to how and why we know an extent was true always about the past. We know there's a part of the past that we don't know about too. We know that, that's part of it's grouped that way too. That we know there's a part of the future that we don't know about, mixed with the seasons value and stuff we do. So there are five. It is 5 ways grouped too. And the difference is also value. And when we examine that, we are shown its identity, the extent we can find of any subject, this nature of truth that is true always, and is of the proper nature. That means truth is not used for lies by that person, let alone some other people and interests, and then even that screen, while the breaching method has that screen, even from themselves. This breaching method has even presidents slash chiefs incapable of decipher of that. And where and how there are exceptions with that, they are fact-cheaping nature, tortured, extorted, and fact-cheaping nature enslaved to keep that physical slavery manifest. In that method that had it all, forced to pretend they had free speech or be censored, even though they didn't have free speech. Be censored, even if there were a majority of people, even if there were everyone black pupils. It is time. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your support. Green King. Nature shows us how to cause positive value, nature progressions, acts, and natures, evolutions, fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. With green chloroplast of plants, we are shown. Like, so for example, we cut a transverse section, a thin slice of a tomato, and we look at it through the microscope, we can observe the body of the cell, a distinct identity of relationship to itself, which is also the nucleus, the value of the nucleus, and where the cell wall slash S, they come together and they hold all the cells as one body, as parts of the body too. All made up of chloroplast, distinctly, non-distinctly, something. Also, so those 3 ways bound, but also it comes with appreciation of the gases and their mixture, positive or negative, and of the water and its elements, positive or negative. That's because evolution is showing there are 5 distinct identities of positive. And when they are not positive simultaneously, there is such a thing as criminal insidiousness nature as a positive. A truth can be used for a lie. Truths can be used to screen lies, put lies between them. which is relative because we have this quality of fact sheet nature that is incapable of defending itself in readings of statutes and precedents or a reality, and of affording ourselves proper defense /S where it counts, where we are fact sheet nature. Some ways, especially. Thank you, people. Vaccines, I keep things belong.